Yet another month that has felt forever long. I was looking at all of the books I read this month, and I started April reading Binding 13, and I was pulling all the books from my bookshelf, and I was like, wait, I read that this month? How is it still the same month? In the month of April, I did read 13 books. These are said 13 books. I have 2 5-star books, which is part of the same series. It's a duology. We'll get into it. And then I have 1 DNF this month. Before we get into the video, I just want to say that I am the type of person who likes to go into books blind, so I like to base my reviews off that as well. I want to give you a little bit about what the plot is about. What? Words? I want to give you a little bit about the plot of each book, but nothing that's going to spoil it. What I usually try to do is give you a waft of the plot and then tell you what the vibes are and let you go on about your merry way if you decide to read it or not. So that being said, in no particular order, I'm just going to grab from the top of this stack. I'm going to start with Forever and Always by AJ Nicole. This is the final novella in the Pain and Pleasure series, and it is so cute. You know how sometimes you'll finish a series and you wish there was just one more glimpse tying it all together, and that's what this was. You can't read this novella without reading every book in the Pain and Pleasure series.
I always struggle to say it. It's like a tongue twister for me.
You have to read the 3 books in the Pain and Pleasure series. Did I say that right or wrong? Next, we have Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This book is a horror. TikTok was doing me dirty with my captions when I was saying that word, but I thought this was a thriller when I first originally bought it because Barnes & Noble be trifling sometimes and puts wrong books in the wrong section. This was in the thriller section. It's a paranormal suspense horror book. And when I first started reading it, I think I got 100 pages in and I was like, wait
a second, something's not right here.
This is a little too spooky scary for me. And then I went on Amazon and looked up the genre, and it was in fact a horror. It started off really strong. Super spooky, eerie, something's not right. I said it gave Conjuring vibes because it did. It didn't end off super scary spooky. There is definitely a twist in there, but it like didn't keep that same like scary momentum in my opinion. Is it still off-putting? Absolutely. Is the ending still very much so what the fuck? Yes. Although it goes down in this book, it's just not like that same, like, it wasn't like explosions, you know? It was more like one of those handheld poppers, you know? That being said, I still really enjoyed it, and I thought it was really good. I think I would give it 4 stars. There is a babysitter babysitting a child who's drawing pictures like this. And the babysitter is like, this is not normal. Next, we have That Sick Love by Jessie Hall. I have read 3 Jessie Hall books, Hawk, Kid, and now That Sick Love, and I will say with my whole chest that Jessie Hall is now an automatic buy author. I love her so much. This is a dark romance. It is pretty dark. There is a lot of dark elements to here and a lot of questionable things happening throughout the plot. But with all dark romance, if you peel back the layer of what the fuck is going on with these people and you look at the deeper meanings, it's so good. I personally love the way that Jessie Hall writes her men. I call them one-liners, but it's like when you're reading the plot and then the main male character just says this one line and it gives you whiplash. You do a double take and you're like, oh, suddenly I'm sad. That was Arrow all throughout this book. Every time he talks, it's just like, I am so scared of you. But yes. Moving on to my 2 5-star reads this month, we have The Confidence of Wildflowers and The Resurrection of Wildflowers. You know when you just find a duology or books that just speak to your soul? That's what this was. So I love these books so much because the writing style is unlike anything that I read when it comes to romance books. I feel like a lot of the books that I read when I'm just reading a romance, like a fluffy romance, is they have a lot of fluff. And I'm not saying that like that's a bad thing, but you know what I'm talking about? Like it's just like there's certain moments that are just there to be like comedic relief, or it's just entertaining to the plot line, but not necessarily important to the plot line. I say this duology is just like straight to the point. It's giving you like these key points that are happening in these people's life that builds up to something bigger. This duology is a perfect representation of how just life is, like how good you think life is and how good it's going. Then shit happens, shit hits the fan, tragedy strikes. How do you handle it? How does life go on? How do you care about the things you once cared about, and how do you survive this tragedy is what this duology was for me. There is also a little novella, The Endurance of Wildflower, which again, if you finish this series and you just want more, that's what this is. It's a cute, nice, kind of like pieces you back together. There is one big trigger warning on this series, and it is child loss. That was really hard for me to read. I don't know what this says about me, okay? But I low-key kind of like books to be triggering because it's hard for me to express those pent up emotions and those feelings. And when I see it in a book and when I see it on paper, it makes me feel less alone. It makes me feel like, you know, people understand what it's like. People have been through it, and if they've been through it, I can get through it too. Next book is a DNF for me, which if you don't know, DNF stands for did not finish. You started the book and you just weren't feeling it, you couldn't get into it, and you didn't want to waste your time no more, so you ended it early, prematurely. You said gone to the wind. For me, that is Breakaway by Grace Raleigh. I know this is technically the second book in this series, but they all can be read as standalones. I know the first book is probably like a football romance, but I was kind of like excited for a hockey romance, and it's just very this book is like people who discovered what sex was, and like that's all they want to do. It would have been so much better, in my opinion, if there was like tension or good banter or more plot. If you like to read books where it's just smut, that's what this book is. And actually, as I'm saying this, it's making me think of Icebreakers by Hannah Grace. And what's funny is a lot of people say that that book is just smut, and I disagree. I think that's what this book is. I'm gonna shut up about it, and I'm going to move on to the next book, which is The Everking by L.J. Andrews. This is such a damn good book. I personally love books that have a good cliffhanger at the end, and that's what this one is. It's Pirate Fae versus Viking Fae, but I know I say pirate versus Vikings, but it's like Viking-esque. Pirate-esque. It's not like full-blown like "Arr, matey" with like the Vikings ready to sacrifice their life for Valhalla. It's kind of like the same vibe. Everking is a morally gray, touch her and you die, pirate, fae, king. So it's Pirate Fae versus Viking Fae. And I didn't know I needed that in my life until I read this book. Give me a second to get into it. I wasn't sure if it was going to be the type of book I would enjoy. I'm struggling for some reason recently getting into fantasy. I think that's because like a few months back I was reading nothing but fantasy, and I may have burnt myself out on it. But this, once I got to the halfway mark, I was fully invested into the storyline and I loved them. Eric Bloodsinger is all I need to say, and the ending definitely really makes me want to read The Everqueen. And I feel like I'm going to enjoy The Everqueen more than I enjoyed this book. Usually when it comes to series, especially fantasy series, the first book is just really setting the scene, it's building the foundation, and then it really tends to pay off in the second book. Keeping on the theme of fantasy, I have the first two books from the Star and Shadow series by Holly Renee, The Kingdom of Venom and Vows and The Kingdom of Blood and Betrayal. I am really enjoying this. I am listening to it on Audible. I do want to continue the series. It's just when I was reading this, I ended the second book and then I went to Readers Take Denver, and I came back and I was no longer in the mood for it, but it still is so good. This is like the equivalent of like a romance book in fantasy form. Like this is definitely heavy around the romance. There's still that fantasy plot line and definitely those fantasy elements, but it's more of like the romance between the two main characters, and it's so good. The main male character in these books, it's the banter that I live for, the tension that I live for. This is everything I want between two main characters. The tension, the banter, the hate, the love. I just realized that I'm in the middle of a lot of series right now, and I have never done that before. I usually will start a series and finish it before I move on, or just DNF the series. But right now I'm in between 3 series. The Ever King, the Star and Shadow series, and this next series, which is the Toem Boy series. Dun, 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 dun. I've read the first 2 books. I'm currently in the middle of saving 6. I can't believe I read these this month. That like feels forever away. How are we still in the same month? I don't know. Binding 13. I feel like if I would have read this 5 years ago,
this would have been my Roman Empire.
With Binding 13, I love it. It's such a good storyline, and this is the type of story where you're getting every single detail within every interaction with these characters. So I would consider this more of like that fluffy writing where you're getting a glimpse at everything, but I still really enjoy that too because it makes you feel more connected with the characters. It makes you feel like you know who they are, and it makes it feel like they're your friends. But because it revolves around 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, it was harder for me to like fully love it. I still think it's such a good storyline, but I feel like a mother hen to all of these people. And keep in mind that this is a
slow burn.
It's a slow burn, and there is like spicy elements, but it's not spicy. I am enjoying Saving 6. It is at a little bit of a different pace, which is throwing me off slightly when it comes to the other books. It's a flashback, and we're learning all of these very key moments in this certain character's life, and I'm loving it. Genuinely, I am. It's just taking me a second to adjust to knowing who they are and falling in love with them and then getting that flashback. That's every book I read in April. Pretty sure. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I think I would remember, but I wouldn't put it past me to forget. Overall, I had a pretty good reading month in April. I'm satisfied with majority of my reads, but that's enough about me. I want to hear about one of your 5-star reads for this month, or if you have read any of these books, and if you agree with what I said, or if you disagree with what I said, let me know in the comments down below. Oh my god, that was such a YouTuber thing for me to say. You know what you should do today? You should try to stretch, because I've been doing that recently, and I feel so good. Yeah. I know, like, just like touch your toes. And if you can't touch your toes, try to touch your toes every day until one day you can't touch your toes. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Bye! Love you!